Hello everybody, welcome to Chapter 6, Using Observation in Guiding Children in the Marion textbook. I present for you all of the learning outcomes. We're going to talk about what observation is, what assessment is, all this wonderful stuff, but this is what I want to talk about. Most of you have probably already had EDUC 102 Observation and Guidance, or you're taking it right now. One of the things, when I was teaching face-to-face at BC3, we did this class every semester. There were 2 education classes that run every semester at this college. It's Intro to Ed and it's Observation and Guidance Pre-K4. This class assumes most have taken it, but it's not a prereq. Because of this, I'm doing my own thing. Textbook's great, wonderful, but when I test you on this stuff, I want you to go to the notes more than the book, because the textbook, the textbook's giving you some basics. I want to go over everything that I think is important in observation. Observation is something I care about greatly. You have to observe children, you have to observe your colleagues, you have to be observant to what people are doing in your early childhood classes, when you have teaching demonstrations. They did something cool, I'm going to steal that, I'm going to borrow that and use it, and build on it. So I'm going to take that approach and I'm going to give you kind of what I think the big ideas, the grand slams are from EDUC 102. And it's a good review and hopefully it'll help you. So observation came out of research in the early 1900s. It basically said that if we watched children in a natural environment, we would know what's needed of them and we would meet their needs. I stress this, it wasn't to help teaching, it was to help psychology. It was so that people understood children better. That is a big, big, big idea. You didn't observe to learn how to teach somebody better, you observed to learn how to understand children. Because once there was consistent practice on what the child's needs were, then you could adjust your teaching to do that. So observation is not an education tool, it is a psychology tool. So where did we observe? Well, honestly, we observed in early childhood. Psychologists did not really care what 13, 14, and 15-year-olds do, and to some extent they still don't. Early childhood development, it really was important because we looked at the developmental levels of kids, their intellectual levels, where they should be, what are their milestones, are they hitting them? We watched, we documented, we took notes, and that was important. So what's important to know really about early childhood education? I want to mention that in the United States, kindergarten and preschool are not required. This is a federal regulation. If you have a child and you want them to go to kindergarten 5 days a year, once a week, you can do that. School district's not going to tell you that, but you can. You don't have to start a child in school until 1st grade when it is mandated, and parents will keep their kids at home. Some of the reasons they do that, they want them to be homeschooled. They want them to focus on bonding with their parents, bonding with their grandparents. Nothing wrong with that. Religious reasons, you're not going to find that as much in Pennsylvania and Ohio. You will more in West Virginia. So there are some advantages to not putting your child in a schooling situation right away. The disadvantages relate to this class because in theory we would argue emotional and social are missing if the child is not engaged with their peers. So Head Start started in the 1960s and 1970s to reduce the economic gap between the upper and lower class. We wanted our poor kids and our students that needed intervention to go to preschools and daycare so they could catch up. Great idea in theory, but it doesn't work. Here's why it doesn't work. When this happens, the wealthy parents naturally say in their minds, well, if that child's getting it, my child better get it too. And then you have, even though the point of Head Start is to catch the kids up, you still have adults that are trying to keep them farther ahead than the others. So does it give them a head start? Yeah, it gives them a jump, but then you got a parent pushing the other child as well. So that's always going to be one of the challenges with Head Start. Clinton administration really pushed Head Start to come back again and said that we really need to focus on early childhood education. Bush administration was more high school-based education. The Reagan administration was core subject areas. When you do a history of education class, you'll kind of look at all this stuff. Head Start, if you're up north, closer to that area, you better know Head Start in the Erie area. If you're planning on going to do your certification at Penn State Barron, Edinburgh, Gannon, and you want to teach in that area, Head Start's a big deal. You're good to observe Head Start. Pittsburgh area, Butler area, it's there, but it's not as much as it is up north. North is where this is happening, and if it's something that you're going to go moving up there, you should probably familiarize yourself with it. Head Start really had this idea that, you know, we wanted to give preschoolers and kindergartners the same material they would cover in elementary school. And we just wanted to drill them with it, give them repetition. And then by the time they got to school, they'd be caught up. It's provided opportunities. It has not closed the gap significantly, but it's helped kids with curriculum and also with social needs as well. So related to that, you go and you observe kids. Here's another lesson in life that if I was doing 102 for all of you, I would tell you this. Every single person, myself included, when I was going through a teaching program, I wanted to go back to my elementary school and my high school to observe. Dumb, 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 dumb. Go to a different district. We are in a state that has 500 school districts. They all have their own personalities, organizational capacities, have different ways of doing things. See something different. Go back to your own school for a day, but go to a different school too. We would argue that all best practices have been determined. You should know how to work with kids. But until you see what that looks like in practice, you still need to conduct observations to see how that looks and how challenging situations can be mitigated. So, assessment. We observe so that we can assess. This is measuring what a child knows and what they can do. Assessment has to be specific to tasks. When I say assessment, that does not mean bubble sheet and test. It includes it, but it doesn't mean it. That means jump up and down 5 times. Raise your right hand, raise your left hand, point to the orange color. That's assessment. Observe assessment. Performance-based assessment is just as good as test-based assessment. So what are our different types of assessment? We'll talk about each one of them. Performance assessment is children demonstrate their skills. Authentic assessment is basically their life and learning, their interaction with everybody, how they're supposed to behave. That's authentic assessment. That's just watching them, commenting on what they do. Formative assessment is gathering information and then using it to shape and improve a program. Summative assessment is done at the end of the year, end of the school year, and it helps document how much children have learned, or if a program's been effective. Curriculum-based assessment, children are assessed on basically what is taught, follow the standards, follow what they are, and you test them on the curriculum. Curriculum-embedded assessment means that different learning experiences occur over time, and the curriculum guides and models what's going to happen. So, NAEYC, you've heard this in all of your classes over and over again, National Association Education of Young Children. Assessment is an integral part of teaching and child development. It needs to be done to make sound decisions about teaching and learning, identify concerns, and help programs improve. Assessment does not have to be a bad thing. It should be used to make programmatic changes. Once again, though, we'll get into what I'm going to be talking about in my doctoral course next week when I teach this lesson. When you do assessment in a high-performing school, it improves instruction. When you do assessment in a poor-performing school, you do it to kind of say, gotcha. And we got to move past that practice. The schools that are above average are the ones that are the easiest organizations to teach in. Your top-notch schools are difficult. Your lowest performing schools are difficult. Your above average schools that are in no danger of becoming average and are never going to hit that cusp, easiest schools in the world to teach in, because all the kids are going to do good, the assessments are going to be good, and it's going to be a continued pattern over and over again. And you'll see that when you go into school districts. So Teachers need to develop appropriate assessment methods. They need to choose the ones that are correct. They need to know how to score them. If we're doing an advanced assessment course, I would go over Marie Clay and the whole method of observation. You have to use those methods and make decisions about them. You need to use them to grade. You need to be able to appropriately communicate them to students and parents. My advice in communication is you write them at a 5th grade level to parents so that they understand everything and it's not giving them targets or scores that make no sense to them. And if there's something illegal going on, you need to let people know about it. You need to understand, and this is difficult to tell a room full of teachers, most of the population loves standardized testing. They do. Teachers hate it. Professors don't particularly care for it. It's a snapshot of student performance and it gives them a chance to be compared to others. My belief is that you need to find a way to use assessment to benefit you in a classroom. Things I do in this class, we're halfway through this class, but as you've seen, I'm assessing you based on your ability to take tests, write papers, design something, and respond coherently to a discussion board. That is my assessment method in this class. I'm not relying just on tests, and I'm not relying just on papers. It needs to be a combination of things. I support standardized testing. I'm a professor that does, but I support it in line with other forms of assessment. If it is the one thing that's everything, that's bad, but it should be used to supplement everything else. So, stakeholders. Different stakeholders are the different people that interact with schools. This can be anybody that has an interest in schools and an interest in education. This can be political interest groups, business and industry, your students, your parent groups, your administrative groups, your teachers. Everyone wants something different. With the groups that you're going to be working with, you're going to have parents and community members involved more than ever. Most classrooms are open to parents at all times. They are. It's not up to you to be right, or it's not up to you to be wrong. Can a parent come into your classroom anytime and observe? Can they get permission to do it? Yeah, they can. If they talk to the right people, they can get permission. Can a parent observe this video? Is there any restrictions to saying, can they observe what I'm doing right now? Well, I opened it up to the public. Makes my life easier. I'm pretty transparent. If you want to look on this, if you want to give it to somebody else who's going to another university, really don't care. If I'm going to give them information that's going to help improve their practice, I'm going to do it. Be observed at any time. So, teachers get to vote. They really aren't decision makers. They give the input to the department head, who takes it to the principal, who gives it to central administration, who gives it to the school board. This is what happens in education. If you are getting in a position to make decisions and change the world and change education outside of the students in your room, teaching is not the position for you. You have to move up in order to do that. You can be a teacher, move into the principal position, then you got more power because then you're influencing the teachers. Principal becomes a superintendent, then he's influencing the principals who are influencing the teachers who are influencing the students. That's where the decisions come into play. So consider that and consider that hierarchy as you look at things. 49 states have statewide academic standards accompanied by mandated testing. This is what the curriculum is defined by, and the district takes the standards and designs the curriculum to meet the needs. So, standards-based education is basically saying that all students from preschool to 12th grade should be able to do A, B, and C. They should be able to do it in a certain order in a certain time. When you standards-based education, you change your teaching and learning based on national, state, and local standards. The advantages to this of standards-based education are that kids are learning the same things in certain grades depending on the location. The major disadvantage with standards-based education is essentially the fact that you're taking away the creativity from the teachers and different kids need different things. And that's important. If we went to a national curriculum, you would be learning the same things in Ohio, Pennsylvania, that kids would be learning in Oklahoma or Florida. Is that fair? I don't know. Demographics are definitely different in Florida than they are in Pennsylvania. So, if you know anything about standards, this is what you need to know. Standards are expectations for what teachers should teach. They should be a foundation for reform and accountability. If kids can't meet a standard, you use that and you change instruction so that they can. It's a foundation. They need to increase accountability. They give greater state and federal control of local education. I am a state person. I am not a local person. I am not a federal person. I am a huge proponent of state standards. I'm not much of a federal because I think every state has its own personality. Local, that creates a challenge for migrant populations moving within the state. But standards can give low-achieving students, a bar to hit. So they can be a good thing. So accountability, this is when you hold people responsible for student performance. And you give them tenure. You give them promotions. You give them bonuses. And you give them merit pay. If you can actually come up with a system that rewards individuals for pay that works, you will be a multimillionaire. You will never do this in your lifetime in schools. Do you know why you will never do this in your lifetime in schools? Because you can't adequately assess every single person the same way. You can't assess every student the same way. You can't adequately assess every teacher the same way. You can't adequately assess every subject the same way. I go in and I do an observation for a music teacher that's going to look a million times differently than a third grade teacher, or an art teacher, or a phys ed teacher. So when you're looking at merit pay, how do you do that? Is there a standardized test in the state of Ohio for music? There's not. So what do you do? So this is important. Teachers hate it. Parents love it. School boards support it. Students despise it. Government officials do support it. It is at both ends of the spectrum. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it is supported by the government. What bothers me is that the people that matter the most are students. They don't like it, but we still do it. So each state has their own standards. Pennsylvania has standards in most subjects, but we only enforce it in 3 subjects. We enforce it in science, math, and English. That's it. We're different. We have enforced standards in science and technology. It's not like a lot of other states. I was a business education teacher. It had national standards, but mine was really different. And if you know any business teachers, you took business classes in high school, try to think about this right now. My standards were national, but when I taught economics, social studies standards. Law, social studies standards. IT, social studies. IT, mathematics. It differed. It differed depending on the subject area. And that was challenging for me because you're teaching one subject and you have to follow different standards. It's going to happen. If you end up in high school, you're going to have to deal with this. It's going to be a challenge. So we use standards for funding. When students perform well, districts get funding. When students perform poorly, they get funding. If students are in a low-income district, they get funding. So where is the suffering the most? Who's the one that's hurt? Good districts get money, poor districts get money. Your average, middle class, run-of-the-mill, okay districts, they don't get money. That's why also they don't change. They'll stay the same because they're not getting the funding that others are getting. So in 2000, about 2000, every state developed standards for K-12 and did assessment at certain grade levels. Mostly 3rd, 5th, 8th, and 11th. Those are your grades where there is testing. Federal, state, and district required testing is dreaded, but policymakers love it because they can use it for comparison. So let's talk about different types of observation. We're going to talk about the strengths and limitations of each method. You know what these methods are, but we're going to talk about what's good about all of them. So observation, we listen and we watch children. Teachers observe children as part of their job. They find out how to use what they see as data is a challenge. And then they decide whether or not they want to do a single child, multiple children, or look for behaviors in all children. If you do it, you don't have to read and write the child. You have to children have to read and write, you can just watch them. You can assess their behavior. They might not even know you're watching them.